Hi everyone, another episode of the Consultant Solicitor Life Podcast, and on with me today, coming from the lovely hinterlands of Mullaney, is Melisa Quinn. So Melisa, the first question I like to ask everyone is, when did you decide to become a lawyer and what made you make that decision?
We're going to go right back to when I was a little child, actually.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a really small town in the west coast of South Island, New Zealand, nestled between the forest and the ocean, and my community was full of farmers, miners, and eccentrics. And I have no idea why or how, but I used to say I'm going to be a lawyer. I didn't know what they were, I didn't know what they do, I didn't know anybody that did such work, but for whatever reason, it was just something that was innately, it always been there. As to where it came from, I have no idea. No idea.
But so you didn't let go of that through, because obviously, I mean, I think I wanted to be, and I stuck by it for a long time, a professional soccer player for many years, but then realised the odds of me making it there were low. I was good, but not that good. And I was better at business. So I went down to the business path. But you, throughout high school and everything, still had that thing in your brain?
Well, I mean, I sort of said that I wanted to be a lawyer or an accountant or a chef. And I gave up the chef thing because I was like, I want to still enjoy food. It's like a love language for me to be able to share gifts like that. And I don't think I was attached to it. Now, there were other dabblings of other things, but yeah, once I left school and I started studying business, it sort of continued on from there. I did take a law class at high school, and the teacher was a really lovely teacher, and it just sort of stuck with me. And I could see ways in which I could potentially incorporate other things I was interested in into this profession. I had no idea how I was going to do it or if it was possible. And I guess that's why I'm here today.
Yeah. And that was my next, the first few years, I guess, after get your degree, first few years in law, what were they like, and how did you find your niche in, obviously, property law now?
Yeah. I entered university maybe about a year or two later. I did what you might call in Australia like a TAFE course, doing business. And then I decided I wanted to go to university. So I wasn't sort of going in with everyone else fresh out of high school. So I felt like I was stuck to like a niche or a clique within university that I had to stay and be friends with. So a lot of my other friends were older students. Some of them were like in their 30s or 40s. Some of them were just a couple of years older than me. And I think that helped with the diversification and bringing in some more perspectives as well. And so I don't think I would say I necessarily went to university like I have to be a lawyer. I just had this innate feeling like I needed to do this. And then whatever life was going to present to me, it would in due course. It was more like I needed to go in and experience it. And then eventually things would be presented to me. Like if I knew too much about what was going to happen in the future, it might skew where life was taking me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Which is it is a different mentality. I think that's why the brand and everything you're making is obviously different to most lawyers, because a lot of lawyers are like, everything has to be prepared and there's like a risk and a backup plan to a backup plan to a backup plan. But obviously you've just glided through. So getting into law, when did you get into law, working in Australia as a lawyer?
Yeah, maybe to give you a bit of a backstory, like I don't come from a background of professionals, so I've never had anyone sitting on my shoulders giving me pressure of like I have to be in this profession, earn a particular amount, be of a particular social status. My parents have always been people that they're happy for me as long as whatever I'm doing is enlivening me and making me happy as well. So that I feel like that's really helped. I haven't felt like I've been so squeezed into a box that I've always got to do things because there's people around me telling me I have to. And yeah, so I graduated at law school in New Zealand at University of Canterbury. I got into the High Court of New Zealand, did my College of Law, so I got all of that, and then I went travelling for 6 months, and I didn't want to come back to New Zealand. I love the place, but I really wanted to be in a warm climate. And so I, after that traveling, moved here to Australia, and it was a little bit scary because I didn't have any connections. I didn't even know anybody. I never even been, like I moved to Brisbane, I never even been there in my life. It was in a lot of full trust that I was where I needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll admit the first few years of being in the profession was challenging for me. I didn't quite fit into any particular shape very well. I wouldn't say I was causing trouble, but there were just some things that I didn't wasn't comfortable with. Sometimes the amount of hours that were required, or the times you had to be available to work, and just the overextending. And I also have other things outside the profession that I like to do, so it's really been important for me to have that flexibility so I can also explore my more artistic expressions as well.
Yep.
Yeah, so there was a lot of jumping around. Like I had never experienced this before, but there was a few times where we had the conversation of like, we actually have to let you go, Melissa, because you're not fitting into what it is that we need. And that's fair enough. It just kept pushing me around to where I found a place, and I worked at for quite a while, actually, up till recently. He too was a musician, and had come into the profession later in life, actually in his 40s. So he had this whole other life background, and it was great to work with him because there wasn't a lot of stereotypical ways in which him and I had to work together.
Yeah. And I think it's unfortunate for the industry that is, and you're right, a lot of kids who go to law school have parents who are both lawyers or one's a lawyer, and they sort of get on this track. And it's at a lot of times, because I talk with lawyers every day and I ask them, like, the first question I ask is like, where do you want your career to be? And I see them have to think, and I'm like, has no one ever asked you this? And a lot of times this is the first time someone's like, what do you want out of your career? And do you actually want to remain in law? Like, it's not like you can change trajectory. And it sounds like you never had an issue with doing that. But were there any major moments where you do, because you've obviously stuck with it and you're good at it in property law. What's made you stick with it in spite of sometimes it is very difficult and very grinding and a hard industry to survive in sometimes?
Maybe part of it comes back to my childhood. Not to go into too much detail with that, but I faced a lot of challenges as a child, and that has helped build a lot of resilience. And I know what it's like to live without, to a certain extent. And so it's just been a lot of trust of like, I've already experienced the real lows that a human can. So it's only seems to keep getting better and better for me. And the more I get out of my own way in a certain way, the more I kind of get led to where I need to be.
Yeah.
And yeah, as long as I'm obviously continuing to give from a good place, it seems to keep getting reciprocated back to me. And obviously having a good support network, whether that's in the profession or out, that really helps as well, because you can feel like you belong somewhere, and you're doing what you need to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very important thing, yeah, regardless of the law or not. So when did the idea come to you of self-employment? Had that been something you'd considered through your career, or?
It was something I considered a number of years ago, because there was a vision that I had about how I wanted to work, and the kind of clients I wanted to work with, and the kind of projects that I want to help them with. And that was sort of, I'd say 2020 that started to come to me, but it didn't feel quite like the right time to be doing that. I also wasn't a citizen. I was only made a citizen in Australia up to this year. So
Yeah.
I was a little bit like, oh, going out on your own, doing your own business, with, really no sort of financial potential backup. It didn't quite make sense. And there was just a lot of uncertainty at the time around the world, obviously. And so, yeah, I just sat with it, and I just patiently let it brew and let it grow and let it develop more and more. I felt like there were more things I needed to embody, and some more confidence as well that I needed to step into,
Yeah.
to be self-employed.
And to be prepared. Well, and then obviously earlier this year, joined the Taylor Rose and started the brand Oneness Lore. So tell me a bit about that. Obviously, many years of thinking about it. Tell me, how would you define Oneness Lore and what you're doing differently?
Yes, so to put it simply, it's more of a holistic approach when working with clients, and it's integrating more emotional intelligence, more psychology, and that's sort of emotional support with clients, and that can be really important. I find most of the time, yes, clients are coming to you because of your intellectual knowledge that you have about a situation, but they also really appreciate it if you can assist them in other ways as well. And yes, I don't work in litigation, but clients still, a lot of what they're doing when they come to me, they're dealing with big amounts of money. Sometimes it's the biggest transaction they'll ever make in their life, or it is usually up to that point. And so there's still a level of stress and uncertainty that they are having to deal with, and it's great to be able to assist them with that process.
Yeah. Yeah, and because on your website, obviously, and I'll put the link to people so they can find it, but holistic property law services, how would you define that term?
It's a more comprehensive and integrated approach with
Yep.
with working with clients, and we're looking at not necessarily always just their own individual needs, but there might be other people that they are also considering, and there might be more longer term goals and values as well that they are wanting to ensure that they're working in alignment with. So we can take them through that process, and yeah, it's a lot about that sort of sustainability of what it is that they're doing, and in alignment.
Yeah, which is great because obviously in conveyancing property law, which is a transactional and sometimes high volume, I think a lot of
Yes.
people forget the human aspect. And I know you're like still obviously big on incorporating tech into your and AI and stuff into your stuff, and he's doing that for you, so you've got more time to the human element of the transaction effectively.
Yeah, it's the AI. I don't feel will ever necessarily replace like the emotional intelligence of a human. Not at this point, anyway. And so, if there's times where there's quite a complex document that I'm having to look at or also write, it's good to be able to have another person like AI to assist with that as well.
Yeah,
It frees up my hands to then be more available for those other aspects that technology can't provide to the client.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
because then I can be more present with the person as well. Like I love being able to actually be present, not feeling like I'm having to rush the phone call or I'm being distracted.
yeah, which is again it seems the quicker we move as a society, the more social media, which is supposed to connect us more, the more disconnected people are coming. And I've noticed, because I'm obviously big into the BD sales, but the ones who are winning are the ones who are bringing back just human connection. Like that's what people are looking for. You can have a million friends on Facebook, but they're not going to be there
It's
when you actually need a friend, sort of thing.
Yeah, quality over quantity, and that's something that I feel like I've carried with me throughout a lot of my life as well, which has really helped with bringing in these values into the business.
Yeah. No, and it's great you've spent so much time preparing that, and obviously over the years knowing who you want to be as a lawyer and what you want to do. So tell me how the first few months within the Taylor Rose consultancy program, how's it been? The ups, the downs, the good and the bad?
Stepping more into trust as well.
Yep.
Having to operate your own business is rather different than being self-employed. For me, I'm loving the freedom, the autonomy, the flexibility that it's
Yep.
providing and allowing. So I've now been able to be a bit more geographically flexible, which is great because that's something I've been wanting able to do for a long time. And I guess the thing that can be most challenging is the trusting of that you're making the right connections, and and that the work is going to be flowing and continuing to flow, because sometimes it's a bit quiet, and then sometimes it's like it's all happening at once.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
No, and that's good.
yeah.
And on that particular topic, like, who would you say are the ideal clients or the ideal partners that you want to work with? Because I know you don't want to work with a million different people, and you don't want to do high volume 30 transactions a day. You want to actually provide a full comprehensive service. So who are those kinds of people that you're looking to work with?
So they would be people that really appreciate looking at life through a holistic lens. And sometimes we can kind of be like, oh yeah, we do this kindness act, or we do this meditation, or we do this kind of like mindful activity, but we can kind of decompartmentalize a lot of these aspects of our life. And why not bring some of your own mindfulness practices also into your experience with the law? It's not necessarily
Yep.
a separate thing that's happening outside of you. It's also another opportunity for you to work with your mindful practices also. Whether it be like you go to a church, or you have another practice that you do. Life is always sorry, there was a bird.
That's good
Life is
nature call,
always
yeah.
yeah, life is always giving you opportunity to always be coming back to those mindful practices. So yeah, my ideal client is those that really appreciate good quality service, someone that they're open to allowing them to like direct. I like to bring clients often back to their own internal authority. What does it
Yep.
feel good for them? Yes, so obviously I can provide all the knowledge and the logic and whatnot, and as long as it's within ethical guidelines. Sometimes the logic can say one thing, but you're feeling something else, so helping them guide through that as well.
Yep.
So sometimes they might feel like they want to do something, and then it shifts and it changes. So allowing that flexibility and letting them know like it is okay sometimes to change your mind.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it's a contractual obligation, it's different, but there's often a time period before you get really locked in. So yeah, the clients that are open to that. And I also have a vision of, I would love to assist people with living in community together. So becoming custodians of land together. To me, that seems like a potential way to mitigate a lot of the living costs, and
Mm-hmm.
for some people it's becoming less attainable to be able to be living on a piece of land by yourself.
Yep.
So, creating community together. Often need an entity to hold that structure of the land, and then you're going to need agreements as to how you're going to live together. And that's going to look different. And again, that looks different as to where you are in the country too, because state to state is different. Different councils have different laws around, can you have a tiny home? Does it need to be on septic? All these kinds of
Yep.
things. So yeah, so it can be that the person that's wanting to get a suburban home but really appreciates the holistic approach, all the way to someone who's looking at creating community, and it could be, hundreds of acres out in the middle of nowhere, or whatever it may be. So yeah, those are the kind of clients that I
It's,
love
and
working
I remember when we first interviewed, and I remember after the call thinking it's a fresh take on sort of the body corporate, like in the city, obviously a big apartment building, got to have the body corporate. But your approach, and I was like, that's actually, because a lot of people don't want to live in an apartment, nothing against it, but don't want to live in that little apartment. They don't want to live out and have some land for themselves, because there is a sense of
with.
ownership and I think empowering thing when you have, even if it's only a small plot and it might be part of a greater community.
Yeah.
And thinking through it rationally, you're right, because the hardest thing about that is, well, how do we delineate who owns what, who does what? The only way to do that is have a centralized person, ideally a lawyer, to go, well, I know this person, I know what you're looking for. It's sort of like when someone writes a will or something, the lawyer knows the intent that they were going for. You know the intent of all these people, and you bring them together to have their own, effectively get into ownership of property, which you're right, is becoming more and more unachievable for people.
Yeah, and where I am right now in Mullaney, I'm about a 30-minute drive from an eco-village that's been operating for more than 40 years. It's set up like a body corporate, and, so these things can last. They don't
Yep.
necessarily have to be a short-term thing, or it could be a time frame. It depends on the client's needs. We can really look at so many ways of holding land together. And obviously there's some restrictions around that, but I want to be able to provide them with more than one option if they're looking at getting land together.
Yeah, which is, as I tell people, it's probably just worth an introductory call to you to find out, like, as a starting point, what are your intentions? Like, what is your ultimate goal? And you actually ask those questions enough, not just to say, to be honest, what an AI can say, give me the property details, the title number, and I can do the transfer of the thing through PEXA. Like, no, let's dig down and actually find out what you're trying to do, which ultimately I like, because I think lawyers have gotten very busy in the last 40 years doing busy work and forgotten that there was a time lawyers were one of the most trusted professions, like doctors and lawyers, because people just went for advice and they want to know the way lawyers think through things is very critical and can analyse objectively. And they went to the advice, and I think it's unfortunate that the industry, for capitalist purposes, but also I think it's just human nature, we get busy doing things and we forget what was our original purpose here. Like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this sort of thing?
Yeah. And for me, I see the law often as a very slow representation of where society is at. So there's things that we may wish to change in the law, but there has to be enough of a demand from the population, enough of percent of the population of actually wanting to get that changed. And then there's obviously all this tape work that has to be gone through before then it's changed as well. So yeah, but sometimes it's like we're feeling like we can't work with it too well, but there's usually always an option of some sort. We might just have to change the way we thought we could do things originally.
Yeah. Which is great. And I think it's a credit to you. And I think it would be pretty inspirational for younger lawyers to know, because if you're in a firm and a junior lawyer, you look to the people above you. And if they're telling you this is how things are and this is how they've always been and this is how they'll always be, it's very easy, particularly when you're younger, you don't have your own full sense of identity, to get swept up in that. But you've obviously managed to maintain your identity and everything through that, which is a credit to you. My last question. Oh, go.
Yeah.
No, you go.
To the childhood thing, I grew up in a community where people really thrived on living outside the box. So sometimes people didn't necessarily want to go with societal norms, and I guess that's something I've held on to. It's like, yes, that might be the way that it's done, in the profession in regards to, the work dynamic or the internal politics that's going on. But it doesn't feel right to me, and I can't squeeze myself into that box. And so I've just been able to be reasonably firm, but kindly firm in that. And that, yes, that has meant that I've had to walk away from firms that I've worked with, but it always kept leading me on to something better and better and better until it got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm ready to go out and sort of do my own thing now.
Yeah.
And I do want to inspire and eventually mentor other young professionals as well to bring in their own artistry into their life and not see it so separate, and finding out a way that they can live a life where they can maybe still do acting or painting or dancing or or anything it is that they also like to do, as well as working in the profession.
Well, and it leads me perfectly. It's like you pre-read, and I know I sent you some overall questions, but I didn't give you a list of questions, into my final question, which was that what advice do you have for people who are considering becoming self-employed? What would you tell them?
Well, you can never feel like you're fully ready, but there'll be something that's telling you that now is the time, now's the time to do it. And it's interesting giving advice like this because I'm so personalized with how I approach things. So how I tell one thing will be different to another.
I'll rephrase the question then. What made you, after obviously 2020 and now we're 2024 when you've launched and started with us, what was that point for you? Like, what was that voice, or was it an external or an internal? How did you come to that conclusion to go, all right, I'm going to do this?
The way in which I notice I operate in life is I get invitations. So a lot of the time I'm noticing invitations around me. And for other people, it might be different. But for me, it's an invitation thing. And so I started to get quite a lot of invitations through a series of different places asking me to work here and work there. And I was like, oh, wow, like people are actually really starting to seek my skills now. And I could notice I'd gone from, I'm no longer considered such a junior, fresh out of university kind of person. I'm now someone who's actually getting into that 5+ years of practicing, and people are, seeking me out. And you had contacted me, and I know I wasn't straight off the bat like, yes, let's do this. I really had to sit with it and to feel into it. And I do like what I would call soundboarding. So I'll often engage with other people that I trust, and I will speak with them about the sort of things that are going on. And I'm not seeking advice from them, but I can hear what I need to know, even just from when I'm speaking, if that makes
Yep.
sense. Yeah.
It does. I stop people during interviews when I ask them the question about what area of law lights you up and what area of law are you in, and I stop them after they've answered, because I said, did you hear the tone difference when you told me the law you enjoy and the one you didn't? Because one was monotonous and like you were deflated and depressed, and one you sat up, you were leaned into the camera like excited.
Yeah.
Do more of that, because that's a great feeling that you should have more of.
Yeah. And so then listening and noticing in the body and the voice of what it's expressing as well. So obviously the outside world can show you things, but you also have to come to a place where you're really listening to what is the body actually expressing to you. And that can really help guide you as to where you need to be next.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. And I
great.
probably, like, as a little bit of a disclaimer, it probably helps that, I'm not married. I don't have children. I'm not looking after elderly parents, and I also don't have a mortgage. I don't have like necessarily what people would consider a stable home, but I'm really like happy to live that way. And for me, that gives me a lot of freedom and flexibility. So I can make these kind of choices and not have to think about huge amounts of expenses or things that I've agreed to, nor do I try and fit into like societal kind of maybe expectations of what kind of car I need to drive or all that sort of thing. And if you do, like, that's okay. But for me, it's made it a lot easier for me to make choices that may seem a bit risky to some people. Yeah.
Oh, and that's what makes me enjoy my job, is we can have people like you who are, and that's what I'd love to see, is everyone's making this model their own. And that's what James and Michelle and myself are very encouraging, to go practice law on your terms. We'll give you the support of a big law firm, but do it on your terms, and let's see what
Yeah.
naturally grows when we give people that autonomy and independence. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's plenty of other people that work for Taylor Rose that, they do have a big mortgage, and they do have children that they're looking after, and they do have these other responsibilities as well. So, it is a model that can work irrespective of where your responsibilities really are. For some people, it's even more enticing to join Taylor Rose, because you're given this time flexibility. As you often like to sort of say, Jason, if you need to do the work at 10 o'clock at night, but then you can't be available between, 2 and 4 because you've got school pickups and stuff like that, like it really gives you that flexibility. Obviously, as long as it's not affecting the client, if there's a deadline, for me working in property, I need to be available at certain times, but still gives me a lot of flexibility. And I have event management responsibilities outside of the profession. So, I often let clients know I'm not available particular days. And I also have other consultants that I work with sometimes. If I am going to be offline for something, that they can then step in and carry that transaction for that day, or assist that client if they really need it, but I'm not available. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
really collaborative environment that I really love about Taylor Rose.
No, that's great. And I'm sure we'll be doing podcasts in the future, particularly because I'm very interested around your ideas of cohabitation and that sort of
Yeah.
eco type villages. My last quick one: what's the best way for people to reach you if they want to have a conversation or use your services?
Yeah, so I have my Taylor Rose website, which is melisa.quinn at taylorrose.com. onennesslore.com.au. I spell my name a little differently, so I'm sure Jason can leave that down below.
Put it in the show
Phone
notes.
number there. Yeah, I also have another website, but I will then bring you over to the Taylor Rose communication. So that one's easy to remember, just info@onennesslore.com.au. And yeah, those are the main things. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and looking at getting a YouTube channel started soon, which is really good. And I'm also looking at potentially doing some talks as well. I have a talk that I like to share, and it's called the Shift in Consciousness and Law, which is really interesting. Talking a little bit about LORE and LAW and bringing that in together, which I can let you know
think
gets going.
I was going to say, I think we've found our next episode title.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
No, that's great. Well, I will leave it there. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Yeah. Thank you.